Good afternoon, joining us from. Welcome to another edition of the Digital Download, which is
the longest running weekly business talk show on LinkedIn, now syndicated on something.
We're getting there. All right.
Internet radio.
Yes, globally syndicated on the IBGN Internet Radio Network. Good job, guys. We'll keep working on that.
That was the joke for today, everyone.
Yeah.
Today, we're talking about the benefits of personality profiling in the workplace. We have a special guest, Angel Tucker, to help us with the discussion. A best-selling author and certified human behavior consultant specializing in administering the DISC model of human behavior, she has revolutionized the way corporations like Walmart and the USAF approach team dynamics and communication. But before we bring Angel on, let's go around the set and introduce everyone. While we're doing that, why don't you in the audience reach out to a friend, ping them, have them join us. We strive to make the digital download an interactive experience. Audience participation is highly encouraged. So with that, introductions. We'll go counterclockwise today. Adam, would you kick us off, please?
Oh, I'm surprised it's me already. Hi.
Get outside your comfort zones, everyone.
Yeah, I'm Adam Gray. I'm co-founder of DLA Ignite, and I'm delighted to be here to be discussing this today.
Excellent. Thank you. Welcome. Alex.
Hello, everyone. So my name's Alex Abbott, the bearded sales guy. I'm the founder of Sapiro. I'm too delighted to be here. It does feel like it's been a while, though. I think I missed last week. So hopefully you
skived off last week.
I did. And I'm a proud DLA Ignite partner.
Excellent. Great to have you here, Alex. Welcome. Tracy.
Hello, everyone. I am glad to be back. I am Tracy Borison. Hello, Beth. Of TLB Coaching and Events, also a proud DLA Ignite partner. And I too am delighted. Are we just all going to be delighted today? We can be delighted. Although I will also say I tend to be the devil's advocate when it comes to personality assessments. So I am excited to get some of my questions answered today.
All right. Nice. Thanks for the heads up. Tim. Welcome.
Hello, everybody. I'm Tim Hughes. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite, and I'm famous for writing the book Social Selling Techniques to Influence Buyers and Changemakers. And Beth Alexander put up a note saying, hello, everyone. I actually have a selfie with Beth. I was very lucky enough she allowed me to take a selfie with her.
Wow.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that was on a flying visit to Aberdeen, wasn't it?
It was, yes.
Excellent. Well, thanks for being here. And Beth, thank you for being here too. Myself, I am Rob Durant. I am the founder of Flywheel Results. I will continue with the theme of delight. I am delighted to be here. I too am a proud DLA Ignite partner. And unlike Tim, I am not famous for writing anything.
Yet.
Yes.
Yet. All right. So, as I said, this week on the Digital Download, we'll speak with Angel Tucker. With nearly 3 decades in the industry, Angel will share with us actionable guidance on how to leverage personality insights for tangible business outcomes. Let's bring her on.
Hi, Angel.
Welcome,
Good morning and welcome.
Thank you. Although I will tell you, after Tracy's introduction, I'm a little scared. I'm like, I got a connection issue. I may have to leave. Sorry.
Tracy is the resident devil's advocate here.
We appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, what's the fun without a devil's advocate, right? Yeah.
Angel, let's start by having you tell us a little bit more about you and how you got here.
All right. Well, I got here through Restream. No. No, so I've been an expert personality profiler for about 30 years, and I like to say that the profession found me. It's kind of interesting how it happened, but many, many years ago, when I was 19, I joined a group called Amway, which we've probably already heard of, and I never did anything with it, but part of their system was to listen to these cassette tapes, okay? So that tells you how long ago it was. Do you guys know what cassette tapes are? Right? I think we're all old enough to know what cassette tapes are. So anyway, I was listening to some of those about personality types, and it was by somebody that uses a different system than me, but it was very entertaining and very enlightening. And so I read some of her books, and then I had to go to a summer camp with a bunch of teenagers. I just got cassette tape.
Did you also need one of those when you've got a cassette tape?
You do.
What is that, Alex?
Sorry to butt in, Angel.
I wish I had a pencil in front of me. Thank you.
And if you don't know what we're talking about, you're too young to watch this show.
If you don't know the connection between a cassette tape and one of those pens or pencils, you are far older than us.
Or
Oh
the
my
missing
goodness.
generation, because I feel like the millennials are very responsible in teaching our children these things.
Oh my goodness, that is so funny. Okay, so anyway, back to my story. I had to go to a teen camp for the summer, and I was a youth director. And when I got there, they called a meeting with all the youth directors, and they said, "Oh, by the way, you get to teach a class every day for an hour, and we have no materials or resources for you whatsoever. So just keep the kids busy, right?" And luckily, I think quick on my feet, and I'm like, well, I just learned about this personality stuff, so I'm just going to talk to the teenagers about this. And I will tell you, Rob, they got it quicker than any adult to this day I've ever taught. They're like, "That's why my dad buys 3 pairs of shoes and rotates them so they wear evenly." And, I just saw like how even knowing the tiny bit I knew could positively impact people's dynamics of their communication, their relationships with other people. So at that point, I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I'm like, somehow this will be a part of what I do. And it's just kind of transitioned to that over the last 30 years.
Oh, that's fantastic. I wanted to take a brief moment to say good morning and hello to Andrew Slesser. We all wave because we know Andrew waves back, although we can't see him.
I do see
Andrew
one-
asks, is that
Andrew?
a TDK tape or a Memorex?
It's a TDK one, Andrew. Yeah.
Brilliant.
That was epic. I wish we could say we planned that, but it was not planned.
Yeah. You'll find nothing's planned on this show.
No,
Yeah.
not really.
That's what makes it fun.
Yeah.
There we go.
I ordered while we're talking about that tape. I ordered. I'm trying to find a way. I need to find a way of converting it into MP3 because it's an interview of me. It's me interviewing somebody before my voice broke. It was for my history project, and I'm going, "Dear Mr. So-and-so, did you
Before your voice broke or before your voice matured?
before it broke?" Yeah. So I would have been. It was a history. So 13. I don't know, 12, 13. Dear Mr. So-and-so, what are you doing?
That is fantastic.
Now we need this. So whoever is
We
out
do.
there who can
We
get
do.
this,
Yeah, right.
because we all need to hear it.
Oh my goodness, that's hilarious.
Get back to the show.
Yeah. Where were we? Okay.
Back to
Angel, actually, let's start with a foundational question.
All right, what do you want to
What is the epic fail in communication?
Oh my gosh. You know what? It's so easy to answer that question because the epic fail when people are trying to communicate with somebody else is we try to communicate with every single person exactly the same. We try to interact with every single person the way that we want to be communicated with. But when they're not like you, that's when we see all of these problems, right? We see this. Well, how did you get that out of what I said? Well, I got that out of what you said because you were speaking your personality language and not my personality language. We see this a lot nowadays with what? With texting, right? We send somebody a message and they get a totally different message than we intended for them to get. And we wonder why. That's why, because you're not speaking their personality language.
I like that.
Simple. You know what is interesting? I'm just gonna add a little to this and not be devil's advocate because I agree with this. That like from a like online communications perspective and also from a marketing perspective, this is something that people very rarely take into consideration, and that there's a group of people who might be able to interpret it the way you're putting it out there, but that is very heavily based on other profile related stuff and very less based on demographics, which is what a lot of people target marketing types of things on.
Right. Yeah. Companies that are smart, that I wish I had some magazine examples in front of me, because companies that are smart use words on the cover of their magazine that appeal to their major market. And what happens is your eye is attracted to those words. You don't even realize this is happening. It's all subconscious, but your eye goes to the word for your personality type. So if I were to have in front of me a Sports Illustrated magazine versus a computer magazine, the words on the cover of those are different because they're different major markets. And so the words on the cover of the Sports Illustrated magazine are going to emphasize status and prestige, where the words on the, I'm just waiting for Tim to hold up these two magazines, by the way, since he has that tape. I'm very disappointed that hasn't happened already. But anyway, the words on the cover of the Sports Illustrated magazine are different than the words on the cover of the computer magazine because they're two different major markets.
Can you tell us a little bit about DISC and how that helps us address that epic fail?
Yeah, sure. So DISC is actually one of the oldest models of human behavior. It's been around since the 1930s. It was created by William Moulton Marston, and it has a lot of validity studies, which means there's a lot of studies that show that, yes, this is accurate to 87%. Okay. And so that's why I like using it, first of all, because it's got the most validity studies. Secondly, it's the easiest to use to be able to talk to somebody else about for a brief period of time and then understand it enough to actually use it. Okay. So I just saw somebody mention MBTI, which is another assessment model earlier. I think it was Beth. And that's a great model, and it's loved by engineers. Okay. It's loved by people who love knowledge. It's just not user friendly, right? You can't talk to somebody about MBTI for 5 minutes and then go, oh, I get it. Now I can go tell somebody else. So that's what I love about DISC. So since it's been around so long, any system that you see that breaks down to 4 is actually DISC. It's just people taking it and calling it whatever they want to call it. So you've got numbers, you've got colors, you've got symbols, you've got words, you've got animals. And so all of them are actually DISC.
So can I just pick up Derek E. Weeks? There's 2 comments. First of all, he asks a question. Just play the tape on Zoom meeting, then download the MP3 of that recording. I haven't got any way of actually playing the cassette, which is I'm thinking about buying
Amazon,
a cassette recorder.
they sell them on
Cassette player.
Amazon.
The other thing about Derek is he's actually he's famous, and he's famous for writing this book, which 2 of us have got.
Oh, geez. So for those that are listening on internet radio, that makes great audio. What's the book?
So Derek has just written and launched a book called Unfair Mindshare. Sorry about this, Angel. It's a CMO's guide to community-led marketing in a product-led world. So Derek, thank you for joining in. His other comment that I wanted to read out is, I've shared personality test insights across my team in the US. Most people enjoy seeing them and sharing the results. Some don't want to. I'm curious of how receptive people are in different countries, e.g. France, Germany, Italy, Japan, India, and any experience with cross-cultural sharing of the models and results.
Love it. Love it. That's a great question. So actually, it's not a cultural thing. It's a personality thing. So the ones that typically resist taking assessments are your high C, and I know we haven't even gotten into the letters yet, but C is you're very analytical, you're 4-level deep thinker. Okay. So these are the people that are very skeptical in nature. So a lot of times they'll resist taking an assessment because they're afraid that we're trying to label them, or we're trying to pigeonhole them. And actually assessments are quite the opposite of that. Okay. In fact, I tell people you actually contain all 4 of these letters to some degree, but every single person has their own unique blend of those letters. Okay. And so the goal here is not to label anybody or pigeonhole you. The goal is to help you understand dominant personality types of people so you can best predict how they need you to interact with them to create what I call win-win situations. And that's really what it's all about. It's about almost like being multilingual, talking about different countries. It's about being multilingual and personality types. So my goal when I go in and train people is I want you to be able to effectively speak to a D, an I, an S, and a C and know the difference between those. And so it's really, more of a personality thing versus a cultural thing. Now, I will say the culture in which you were raised is one of the 3 factors that can kind of shape and mold and form who you are as a person.
Yeah. So I have a question.
Before we go too down the road, I apologize, Alex, but we've alluded to the letters a couple of times now.
Yeah.
Can we break that down for the audience? And then, Alex, I'll have you pick up where you were going to ask.
Yeah, sure. So the letter D stands for dominant. So if you've ever heard somebody say, I'm a type A, that is the letter D. These are the go-getters. They like things done their way. They like to be in charge. They need to constantly be doing stuff. They need organized chaos in their life. Okay.
Was that Rob just then? Was he demonstrating a D? Yeah.
Yep, exactly. He's like, listen, people, get back to why we're here. Okay. So the letter I stands for inspiring. This is the person that lights up the room just by walking in it. These are your people who never meet a stranger. They're motivated by being with people. They're very interactive. They're outgoing personality types.
Tracy.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then you have your S. Okay. So this is your think Mother Teresa, think Kumbaya. Okay. This is your peacemaker. These are the people that are great with building relationships. They're more reserved, but they're still motivated by people like the I types. Okay. So they like to build relationships. And then the C is your cautious. We mentioned this earlier. Your analytical, any scientist, engineer, professor you've ever met was probably a C personality. They love 4-level deep learning.
Got it. Thank you. Alex.
Thank you very much, Rob. So back to the language of one's personality and thinking specifically about salespeople. Generally speaking, salespeople learn to develop a skill called mirroring.
Yes.
So is mirroring what you're talking about, or is it something else?
No, mirroring is actually part of what I teach people how to do. So all mirroring is copying what you see the other person do. So in other words, if somebody is speaking quickly and giving bottom line information, then that's what you should do. That's really all mirroring is. It's just copying what you see happening in front of you. So when we recommend mirroring is when you don't know who the person is, like you haven't figured out who the person is yet. Like it's like, okay, I know they're a D or an I because they're speaking quickly, they're talking over the end of my sentence, and they're using their hands when they talk. Okay, so there's certain things you can observe about a person to what I call speed read them. Okay, so if you observe that they're doing one of those 3 things, that could be one of 2 personalities. It might be a D or it might be an I. So what you're going to do is you're going to copy whatever they're doing until you figure out which one it is. Okay, so at least you're on the road to creating what I call that win-win situation with that person.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And how long does it take before you, because I feel like mirroring is easier than knowing the letters of DISC.
It is to a certain degree, but when you get down to, okay, I know they need details, but how do they need me to present them? Okay, when it gets to something like that, mirroring is not going to help you anymore because now you're going into a new experience that you can't copy what they're doing, right? And so it will get you to a certain point, but unfortunately it's not like the be all answer. You're still going to need to understand, how do I need to interact with them long term to create this win-win situation that I want?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I just had a situation today actually where a potential customer was telling me they're getting butterflies about the, kind of the scope and the proposal. And I'm thinking, okay, actually, I need to think about how I respond to this.
Yeah, exactly.
What are
Usually
they
when somebody
thinking or
says
feeling?
something
Yeah.
like that, it's probably so S personalities are natural worriers. They're very anxious with the unknown. And so when you hear people say, when you know what to look for, you can figure someone out within about a minute. Here's the hardest part of doing what I do. Paying attention to other people. Because who are we normally, if we're being honest, who are we normally focused on?
Ourselves.
Right?
Ourselves.
Exactly. And so you have to take the focus off of you and put it on the other person in order to figure out who the person is on the other side of the conversation, right? And when you do that, and when you know what to look for, then it gets a little easier. Now, there's some people, it's only about 1% of the population, they're actually what we call level, which means they're even in all four personalities. Now, they're not born that way. They've conditioned themselves to be that way. And there's three things that kind of like shape and mold and form your personality, because you can die something completely different than you were born. Okay. So the three things that kind of shape and mold and form who you are your experiences, your environment, and the culture in which you were raised, which is why I mentioned that earlier. And so anything you can name can be put into one of those three categories. And so those kind of shape and mold and form who we become. So sometimes you're level, which means you're even in all four. So it's hard for me to look at you and go, oh, yes, you're a D. Oh, yes, you're an S. And so that's when the value of something like mirroring comes into play.
And so on that though, Angel, while this isn't about focusing on ourselves, how valuable is it to know what you are so that when you're trying to adjust or mirror to someone else, you take into consideration that like, this is how I would see it and this is how you would see it, and there's a difference there?
That is such an important question, because the reality is that the way that someone perceives us also will affect the way they receive us. Okay. And if we're being honest, there's many times where we've decided whether we like a person or not that we've never actually met. Right. We didn't like the way what they were wearing. We didn't like the way what somebody else told us about them. We didn't like the way they spoke to us on the phone. So we've already made a decision how we would receive that person if we interacted with them. Okay. So what's important to understand is the way that someone perceives you doesn't matter whether it's true or not. It's their reality of you, right? And so it's going to affect the reception as well. So back to your point, Tracy, it's important to understand how other people see us, because sometimes people see us differently than we see ourselves. For example, as a high D personality, which I am, I see myself as a go-getter, but other people might perceive me as being overbearing or bossy or rude, or this is a big one, thinking I look down on them. Okay. Because D's carry themselves with confidence, and you don't have to wonder what they're thinking. They're going to tell you. And D's are only 10% of the population. So if you think about it, that could potentially be bad for the other 90%, right? And so understanding myself, Tracy, I know that when I'm interacting with, especially an S, I got to pull it back. You know what I mean? Like, I can't come on so strong, because that's very intimidating to them, which of course makes them very uncomfortable. So understanding yourself is vital.
Following up on what you were asking, Alex, Beth Alexander says, I reckon a lot of salespeople will be Ds, but the Ds wouldn't necessarily be the best salespeople.
Beth, I love you so much. It's funny how you look at different industries and see that personalities are naturally attracted to them. Okay. So there's 10% of the population in Ds, but probably 60% of salespeople are Ds, right? And so the industry of sales attracts naturally Ds and I personality types. Now, here's the funny thing is the most loyal customers you'll ever get are S's and C's. But D's and I's rarely get them because they don't understand how they buy. Okay. And so what happens is they're constantly working harder to get new business versus just understanding the personality types that are most loyal that will send them the referrals in the first place. You just have to understand how to get them.
So then, Angel, would you also say that it's like a little bit short-sighted to say, okay, I'm a D, so I'm going to go for Ds because we communicate the same? What I think about that from a percentage perspective, like I've just like limited my target audience severely.
Exactly. It's kind of like the low-hanging fruit, right? But it doesn't mean long range. You know, if this is something that you tend to turn into a career, isn't it easier to have the business come to us than to go after the business? And so you have to kind of have that mindset shift where you realize that, yeah, this may be the easiest thing to do, but is it the best thing to do, right? And that's kind of where we have to ask ourselves those critical questions.
So is it realistic to divide the entire population into 4 major personality types? Because
this is the problem I generally have with personality.
Yeah, and so this is where you're getting back to, you're just labeling, everybody who's a D, you're exactly alike. Remember, you're a blend of all 4, okay? I will tell you, Adam, that it's better than guessing, okay? And
absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's just that, everybody here is complex. And, and there are elements that if you were to say Rob's a D, and he is in some ways, but equally he's completely un-D-like in other ways. And whenever I've looked at these personality tests, I've always kind of found that they come back and depending on how you answer the questions, if it's one that you fill out yourself, depending on how you answer the questions, because I'm a bit of this and I'm a bit of this and I'm a bit of this. And you I don't know, I just find it really difficult to apply this kind of framework to individuals.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, and that's why it's only 87% accurate, because exactly what you just said, the way you answer the question, right? Because sometimes people say, people tell me I'm this, so I'll make that selection, or I wish I had a bit more of this, so I'll make that selection, or, I can be this if I try, so I'll choose that. So when you do an assessment, one of the things we tell you is don't take too long to do it. Your answers need to be instinctive, right? You need to pick the one that you're 51% of the time. That's what you are all the time, right? And so, but there are situations, Adam, where let's say I'm a very bottom line person, which I am, but when it comes to this one situation, I want details, okay, which is unlike my natural D or I type. And that's why I say we contain all 4. So it's important for people to understand that, yes, you can tell what someone's dominant personality is, but you also have to understand the importance of paying attention and seeing that, yes, okay, yeah, I know their bottom line. So why are they asking me for details in this situation? Because in that situation, another letter takes over. And that's what you need to mirror at that time, going back to what you were saying earlier, right? Because we all have all 4 personality types in us. We all have a little thing we do. Let me give you an example. My husband is an SI personality. Now, SIs are very laid back. They're very easygoing. He's retired military. So when he was active duty, we moved 12 times in 15 years. Okay. My husband could live out of boxes until the next time we moved, as long as the bed was made. Now, making the bed is a C thing, okay? Because C's like structure, they like organization. So as long as the bed is made, he is just fine, all right? So in fact, when we first got married, he used to make the bed around me, okay? I'm still in the bed, and I can feel him, tucking in the sheets and making the bed around me. Now, I don't make the bed because I'm a D. It's a waste of time. I'm going to get right back in it again at the end of the day. But that was his C thing. Okay, so we all have a thing that we do. So, Adam, what I'm telling you is there's no absolutes. Okay, yes, we can understand where to start, what road to go down to create this win-win situation. But we have to understand that you can't pigeonhole people. You can't say, you're all D, you're all I. It just gives you a place to start creating those win-win interactions that we want with other people.
We have some comments from the audience I want to get to. Jan Compton says, the C in me really wants to know how the 87% accuracy was calculated. And Beth Alexander says, me too. I'll leave it to them to do their research, those C's. They can go out and investigate on their own. I wanted to get to this
that's so
comment,
funny.
this question.
Oh, I love it.
Derek
Okay.
Weeks asks, I feel like some folks have one personality at work and another personality in their personal lives. Is that common?
That is a great question. Okay, so here's what happens. We stay our first personality letter until one of two things occurs. Okay, one, our first letter is satisfied. So let me give you an example. I'm a DI. I will stay a D until one of two things happens. One, my D is satisfied. So let's say that we've planned to go out for fondue this Thursday. We're having a ladies' night. I've known about this for weeks. I'm looking forward to it. As long as I get all of my D stuff done, and I get my bonus task done, by the way, because D's always have a bonus task. As long as I get all that stuff done, I can jump to my I and have fun guilt-free, okay? Because my D is satisfied. The other situation that would cause that is if my D isn't working for me. Okay. And this usually happens subconsciously. If I'm in a situation where my D isn't getting the deal, let's say I'm a salesperson and my D is not getting me the deal, then what will happen is, without me even realizing this, I'll jump to my I because my D didn't work, you see? So I'll jump to my I and I'll start telling jokes. I'll start livening up the room. I'll try to shift the mood with my I personality because my D wasn't successful. And so this is why we're different with our kids than we are with our friends. We're different at work than we are at home. Usually it's out of necessity because the first letter isn't going to work in that situation, or the first letter is happy, so we can go to the second letter. So that's why that occurs.
Would you also say, Angel, that there are times where people have been conditioned out of their primary letter?
Yeah. So remember we talked about the three things that kind of shape and mold and form who you are: your experiences, your environment, and your culture. So for example, there are many cultures where it's not acceptable for the female to be dominant. Okay. And so maybe you have a female that was born a D, but her entire life, Tracy, she's been told children are to be seen, not heard. Only speak when you're spoken to. Sit down and shut up. When you're told those things long enough, the conditioning is going to make that letter go down. And then by default, what's going to happen? Another letter is going to go above that. So yeah, great question.
Because I think I've seen this happen specifically in work environments, to answer Derek's question as well, is that I call it corporate trauma. Right? You work for a specific person or in a specific culture in an organization. And so maybe that culture deprioritizes the value of a C. So now you're trying to be more of a I because you think you should in order to get where you're trying to go in your career. And that may or not be happening at home because you have a completely different environment there.
Exactly. And interestingly enough, you just reminded me of something that is kind of an interesting tidbit. The majority of the population are introverts, are more reserved, but they feel pressured to be extroverts. Okay. And so you'll see a lot of people who you may think they're an extrovert when really they're not at all. In fact, I have a friend, he's got like 3 million followers on social media, but he's an introvert. Okay. But he has to be an extrovert because that's what people expect of him in what he does. Right. And so, yeah, just interesting point based on what you said.
I have that conversation with people all the time because I do think for a long time, especially in the work world, we've been convinced that to get to the high levels, you have to be an extrovert. So if you're an introvert by nature, you have to adjust who you are to achieve that, which I think is completely bunk, but yeah.
Yeah, but
introverts want to follow people too. And sometimes they like to follow introverts.
Right.
So Angel, just so you know, last week we had a comedian on. And it was a very good session. And Mark Harrison spent the whole time telling jokes in the chat. The thing is, he's doing it again this week.
He's just looking for a platform to tell jokes.
Yes. So we've got. He said personality test I completed recently said, tell us a little something about yourself. My response was, I'd rather not. I really want the job.
I like the next one though.
And I was recently asked, how well do you perform under pressure? And my response was not bad things, but I do a great Bohemian Rhapsody.
Love it. Love it. Oh my
Thank you,
goodness.
Mark.
That is so funny. So yeah, and it's funny how certain professions attract certain personality types. So if I'm doing a session for salespeople, it's going to be mainly D's and I's. But if I'm doing a session for administrators or accountants, you know, now it's going to shift over to the S and the C's. But speaking about comedians are normally a D or an I, and the way you tell is by their type of humor. Okay, if they're actually funny, they're an I. D's are very sarcastic in nature. So we have Sam Kinison, George Carlin, Roseanne Barr, Jerry Seinfeld. And if you think about their type of comedy versus somebody like Eddie Murphy or Bill Murray or Jay Leno, you can see the difference between, you know, the comedy of each of the personality types.
So, Angel, when we were preparing for this call, you had talked to me about someone being under control or out of control.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so personalities are different depending on whether they're under control or out of control, right? And so we actually have, whenever I do come in and do a speaking engagement for companies, it's something I really like to address. One, so they know what to look for, right? Like if this personality is exhibiting these behaviors, this is not normal for them. And so now we need to sit down and have a conversation. And so it's important to know what the under control versus the out of control is for each of the types. So you kind of know what to expect. I can guarantee if you've ever had a conversation with an out of control D, it was not pleasant, right? And then going back to something Stacy said earlier about self-awareness, it's important kind of for us to look at this list and do a little self-evaluation and say, oh yeah, I'm some of these words right now, and this is something I need to work on.
So what are the practical steps to applying personality profiling within an organization?
Well, what you want to do is you don't just want to have a DISC class. You want to actually have a DISC culture within your organization. And the companies that I work with have kind of made this their language. It's like their universal language. And the benefit of that is they can pick up the phone. You know, if I'm in sales and I say, hey, I'm sending you a client, he's an I, that's all I have to say. And now that person knows how to probably interact with him to create that win-win situation. So what does that do? It makes me look good, because I sent him to somebody who knew how to work with them. It makes the salesperson look good because they knew how to meet the needs they haven't even told them they have. And then the customer walks away happy, which means what? They're going to tell other people, right? And so, you know, when you create this culture, which is very easy to do by taking a few steps in your organization, then you benefit from DISC. Just having a DISC class, it's great information, but if you don't apply it, it's not going to do you any good. So our goal is always to kind of take it one step further and put it into action when I go into a company.
Okay, I know Angel has to leave, but I have a very quick question associated with that, because I've been part of organizations where they like try to layer a whole bunch of the like personality assessments, and we have Clifton Strengths, and we have DISC, and we have this, and we have that, and like I feel like at that point, then it becomes very difficult to use because I don't have an internal language. So yeah, whether or not it's DISC, would you recommend? Yeah, that's one of the things I just wanted to, because I think that's something that I've had people be like, oh, I'm a 3 and an 8 in the Enneagram, and I'm a this over here, and I'm
So is that user friendly? That goes back to what we were saying earlier. DISC is so user friendly. You know, I started with choleric, sanguine, phlegmatic, melancholy. It's a lot easier for me to say I'm a DI than to say I'm a choleric, sanguine, right? And so that's what I love about DISC is it's simplified, you know, and it's user friendly. I love information, but if it doesn't do you any good, what was the point, right? And so, and also I would tell you on our assessments that you do, we actually have 2 graphs. One is a basic graph and one's an environmental graph. So it shows how you normally are versus how you're operating right now. And when you understand how to read those, you can identify areas of concern before people have even like acknowledged them. And so that's another reason that I like the DISC model, is because we have those 2 graphs, which are value added as well.
Before we let you go, you mentioned 10% are Ds. Do you have the breakdown on the others?
Yeah, of course. So 25 to 30% are Is, 30 to 35% are S's, and 20 to 25% are C's.
Excellent. Angel, this has been fantastic. I wish we had more time with you because we certainly
I'm
have
so
more
sorry.
questions. How can people get in touch with you? How can they learn more?
Super easy. Usingdisc.com. Can't get any easier than that. So we have tons of materials, resources, assessments. There's a contact me page in there if you're interested in me coming and doing some training with your organization, either virtually or in person. So I'd love to have some people reach out.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being a part of today's show.
Thank
We
you,
are going
Angel.
to continue for a little bit longer, but I know you needed to get going. So
Yeah, I got to get the kids off to school. It's like 6:40 in the morning here in California.
well, we really appreciate you being here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
You
you.
bet.
Thanks, Angel.
Take care. Thank you so much for having me.
So,
Wow.
As
Andrew
Angel
Slessor-
leaves, we have a question.
Yes, so Andrew Slessor, I think it's worth putting up his comment. He said, I was recently asked to describe myself in 3 words. My answer, lazy.
All right. But yeah, well, as Tracy said, not Stacy, as Tracy said, we have a
Be
question.
surprised how often I get that. I'm
Yeah.
just straight.
Owen Davis asks, how does stress impact personality types? So I am no expert in this field, but I do actually teach a class that was based on the foundations of DISC. And as Angel was telling us, we are all at some point each of those personality types. I would dare to say, going back to the answer she gave, where if your primary is solved, then you move on to your secondary. Stress may impact what suddenly becomes primary. I like to tell my students, I give an assessment much like this. I say, before I even give you this test, I could have manipulated your answers to get the result that I wanted. What do you mean? I could give you any one of 3 scenarios. I could have given you, but the scenario I gave you was, hey, let's do this. We're going to have some fun today. And don't overthink your answers. Instead, I could have given you this test and said, this is critically important. This is going to impact your grade. You would have answered some of these questions differently. I could have instead said, thanks for coming in for this job interview. But what we're going to do before you sit down and interview with anyone is we're going to have you take this personality assessment. Now you're going to answer based on what you think I want to get that job. Or I could have said, hey, let's put you in a situation where 5 years from now, the business you started today is highly successful. You are the CEO leading 300 people in your organization, which is great, except that all 300 of them are coming to you for answers about everything. You're going to put your D hat on there. You're going to have to make decisions and be abrupt and so on. So I would contend that stress would make it just as contextually relevant to how you not so much answer the questions, but how you behave in that moment.
I think an interesting add-on to that, Rob, is also that I think the power is in asking this question, Owen. When we are like practicing the ability we talked about of observing ourselves and observing other people, being able to pay attention to how does stress impact that personality type. I'm sure there's probably some great resources on the usingdisc.com website that speaks to stress as well. But I think the answer is in the question, although I always think the answer is in the question. And similar to Adam's point earlier about how we're all a little bit different and we all have a different formula of these 4 things that are coming together. I think the power, especially from a managerial perspective, is how am I paying attention to how stress impacts the personality types of my people?
Absolutely.
That's a good point, Tracy.
I really wanted to dig into that 87%, because what does that mean? And I think it's more about that contextually relevant. For me, the lesson isn't, oh, I'm a D, or I'm walking away as a C. And I tell that to the students. I don't want you to think about that, because I could get you to be a little bit different from what you are, just based on the conditions that we set up prior to that. What I want you to realize is that you have all of these elements. And the other thing I want you to realize is, so does everyone you're talking to. And I think that's really how we started this conversation. The epic fail in communications is, we start with us, we end with us, and everywhere in the middle, it's all about us. And that's where I really wanted to dig in more with DISC, and how to apply what we know towards better communication.
That's what I'm taking away from this conversation. Is it's a lovely reminder that when I'm having a conversation with someone or interacting with someone, and they're responding in a way that I don't like for whatever reason, maybe I can help them. Maybe I just need to take a step back and think, okay, so they're not being rude intentionally, so how can I then change the way I'm communicating in that situation to have a better interaction, better outcome?
We have got some absolutely fantastic comments in the audience here. So Mark says, he asked the question, doesn't the military train soldiers in stressful situation tests in order to determine how it impacts individuals? I'm sure
they do.
But a really interesting observation, because clearly there's little more stressful than being in a situation where you might lose your life. And then Yayan says, there's been no mention so far, but the emotional energy required for a C to behave like a D. Yeah. I mean, I hadn't even considered that, we know from our experience of coaching people around social, being yourself is a difficult thing to do, but it's a hell of a lot easier than being somebody else. And the idea that you have to slip on a coat to be something that you're not is exhausting, isn't it?
I think that I don't know if there's or if DISC or any other organization has done measurements on that, but just from personal experience, I know that if I'm trying to show up as not an I, then it's work for me. And even as an Alex said, if I know I have to adjust how I'm talking to somebody, there's emotional energy associated with that too. So I think that that's important to take into consideration, is that likely the easiest energy is for all of us just to show up as our dominant personality, and it works for some people and it doesn't work for some people, and oh well, you'll hang out with your people. And at the same so then what's the balance you want to strike? Is this a relationship you want to maintain? How much emotional energy are you willing to, and I'm not in the scenario of changing who you are, but in putting the effort into having a productive relationship with somebody. I think that is relevant in business and also relevant in our personal lives.
Yeah, that's the key, I think, isn't it, Tracy? Just let me add to that, because and I wish I could ask the question. Sorry, Angel. Thank you. Which is so how do you if someone is just not willing to adjust their communication style when you're having a conversation, and for whatever reason they feel offended, upset, well, I'm just being myself, so you can take that or leave it. And it's like, well, actually, I'm trying to help you. Perhaps you could say that in a different way. How do you coach someone else about?
Well, and I think to some degree people have to want to play the game, right? So if I choose to be in a relationship with you and you choose to be in a relationship with me, then we can make that work. But if I show up and I am trying to play that role, I actually had a conversation like this yesterday where there were 2 other people in the conversation. You're like, whoa, if we were not virtual, I feel like someone would be punching the other person right now. Just like, whoa there, let's pull this back a little bit and explore. And I feel like from a moderator perspective, it's possible, but when it's just two people, both people have to choose it. And you can create the opening for that, but at the end of the day, someone else has to walk through the door.
Yeah.
I want to get to some of the comments, but just to share what I share with my students regarding that. Most people aren't recognizing that they're in a conversation that are speaking on two different levels. Everyone thinks you receive the information just the way I intended.
Rob, you're just not listening, mate. You're just not listening.
No, I've got to move on, Adam. So, in response to Jan's question, Beth Alexander said, I'm a C who had to be a D in a previous job, and wow, was it tiring. I didn't know that was happening at the time. And then we have Mark, who added, learning from watching how others respond to stressful situations allows you to adjust your own personality. Try going to a temple and mix up all the shoes. Okay.
That sounds like a terrible idea.
Yeah. Owen shared, great, thanks. I think this is in response to us trying to address the
answer his question.
Trying. Really insightful. Working in product, communicating and understanding people is a huge part of the job. Really interesting and thought-provoking. We have Andrew. With adapting to all the personalities and trying to cope, will this stress out a person and raise the issue internally with them of imposter syndrome? I can answer that. Imposter syndrome doesn't exist. You'll have to go back 3 weeks and listen to that episode to find out why.
Also, can I share my definition? Because I don't know if I have on the show. So long as you're trying to be someone else, you'll feel like an imposter because you are.
There you go. Other comments? Well, now we're just peeking in on a one-to-one conversation, aren't we? Jan's responding back to Beth. For me, that's the benefit of knowing a little bit about these tests. We recognize when we're not being our default self and burning all our matches. I would agree with that completely.
Yeah, that's an interesting point too, because I would guess that there's also specific personality types, I's, and S's, it sounded like as well. I don't know the details of DISC as much as Angel, obviously, but like I'm innately curious about people. So it actually feels easy for me to like observe these types of things that might not be true for a different personality type. So there might be more energy output there from other people. So I think it's also important to know that about yourself and pay attention. To Andrew's question, if you are finding yourself like overly stressed out all the time, trying to adapt to these personality types, at the end of the day, it's up to you to manage your stress level. So maybe I do want to, or maybe I am a C hanging out with all Ds. Maybe that's why I feel like it's overpowering, because I am constantly trying to adjust myself to match the people. Maybe I could bring some more C's into my community. That makes it feel a little bit easier, so I don't have to adjust as much with those people. Again, I think the answer's in the question.
So that reminds me of the takeaway I try and leave my students with. In the moment, none of us really remember very well that the person we're talking with is most likely not receiving information in the same way that we receive information. In the moment, we are like two ships passing in the night, never to see each other. When you step away from that and realize, oh, we weren't communicating very well, that's when you can maybe follow up and try a different approach. If you can apply that in the moment, kudos to you. But I don't think most of us can. I think simply being aware that there's more than one way to send and receive a message is the critical first step in whether it's DISC or any other personality type, and then going from there.
So something that I tell my 5-year-old all the time is that mommy and daddy and you might all be in the same room and one thing is happening, but none of us are experiencing it the same way. So the only way we can know that is to tell each other it.
There we go. All
Lessons
right.
for a 5-year-old.
This has been another episode of the Digital Download.
Well done, everybody.
Yeah.
Great
Yeah.
conversation. Thank you so much to our very active audience today. If you have something to say, if you want to be a guest on the show, we want to hear from you.
Yeah,
You can
Mark.
scan-
Mark.
Yeah,
Mark seems to have lots to say. You should come be on the show.
Yeah,
absolutely.
all of you.
Andrew,
All of you.
Owen,
Yeah.
Owen, come on, Owen.
Yeah, be on the
Ryan,
show, friends.
all of you. Come on.
You can scan the QR code on screen. For those of you on internet radio, probably cannot scan the QR code. Visit us at digitaldownload.live and click on Be Our Guest. On behalf of myself and the panel, to our audience, to our guest, thank you so much for being an active part of today's show. Another fantastic episode, and we will see you next time.